Like to thank everybody for joining me today. Today, I've got a special guest with us. I have Shane Loar with us, and I want to bring Shane on to talk about the need for long-term care because I think Shane has a very unique perspective just from a personal and from a professional standpoint. So, Shane, appreciate you getting on.
Good morning,
Um,
Rick. Appreciate being here.
I'm going to ask some very loaded questions. And
Okay.
first of all, can you give us some idea from a personal standpoint what you've dealt with long-term care? Because I know it's pretty extensive.
Well, to begin with, my career lasted 15 years in home health, hospice, and assisted living facilities. And so the gamut is the whole healthcare continuum of care. So professionally, that's where I come from, background. And then my parents, both of them lived with me at some point before they passed. They both received hospice care in my home. So it's fairly extensive, Rick. I've got quite a bit of experience, and it it's an important thing, and I'm glad that we're discussing it today.
So on the personal side with your parents, were they prepared for long-term care?
They were not, and it's interesting as I thought back about it. They're both gone, but I was, as much as I was involved, I was not as prepared in helping them. I was a little bit, but not as much. But they were not. They were not prepared. So it was kind of it was a shock for them and for everybody when the long-term care event happened that they needed that long-term care, and it was kind of a difficult transition for the family, and it was kind of a shock. It was quite difficult.
Now with your parents, looking back, what would you do different?
Well, long-term care insurance today is much better than it was back then. So if it was me today, I would definitely be looking into some long-term care insurance, some type of insurance. And there's lots of options now where that goes. But that's what I would have done. I would have looked more at the long-term care insurance that's available out there. Most people think that Medicare or Medicaid is going to take care of them, and it does not. It will not do that. So I would have looked at the long-term care insurance possibilities. Even back then, Rick, it would have been better off back then to have it than not.
Okay. Talking about Medicaid and you being, in the profession business as an owner of assisted living facilities, what is the difference? So if somebody has to rely, looking at Medicaid versus private pay on assisted living, is there a difference in the quality of facilities?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you asked me that question because that's what happened to me personally. When there's private pay involved, there's a different level of care provided. There's more cares provided. It's in a better environment. It's in an environment with an assisted living facility where there's lots of activities and things going on, and it's just a better environment overall. Now, there's smaller facilities are a little cheaper, and those are okay, but your Medicaid does not typically, the reimbursement is so low that your bigger facilities do not take Medicaid. So it just goes really kind of without saying the cost that they reimburse is going to get you into those lower end assisted living facilities, and a lot of those are not real desirable, and it's difficult to see that with a parent going to those facilities. So yeah, Medicaid is going to cover very very little, and it's going to be into a facility that is not necessarily, they're not bad. I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying that's what you get what you pay for basically.
Okay. From the home healthcare side, and I've personally I've had to deal with a family and the long-term care situation. Personally, I haven't really been involved that much. But when you with the home health care, well, let's take people that are kind of getting into that need for long-term care.
Mhm.
is it how I know it's a gradual process, but can you kind of walk me through the process of how somebody starts into needing care, whether, from the very start all the way till they might need full on nursing care?
Well, that's an interesting question. Everybody's a little bit different, obviously, because we're all human. But typically, what will happen is there will be an event. So, for example, if mom falls and she has an event of falling and it's probably possibly breaking a hip, she'll end up in the hospital. And if she stays in the hospital for 3 days, at least 3 days, they'll discharge her to a skilled nursing facility with rehabilitation facility there, and typically they can stay in that rehab facility for up to 100 days, and that's all covered from the hospital to the nursing home. That's covered. So the challenge is when they are going to be discharged and come home. uh, High percentage of them will need to come home with some physical therapy, some nursing, or whatever, and that is covered through Medicare, but it's very intermittent, which means that it's not going to cover for very long, probably just a few weeks to a month, something like that, 6 weeks. That, Rick, is when people run into the situation when they're not prepared for mom to be coming home or to be home and need to have somebody coming in, like a nurse or therapy or an aide, to take care of them. And so then that's when the financial need really hits. And it really takes people that are not prepared for that. And it's kind of a hard situation to be in. But that's when long-term care can actually come in and allow mom to stay home. Just a real quick example. I remember talking to a friend of mine here just a couple of years ago, or not very long ago, and was talking to him about home care, taking care of his mother at home. He was writing a check for $14,000 a month for his mom to be home, which you can calculate that out annually, and you're hitting close to $500,000. They could afford it. His dad had a substantial amount of income, but most people can't afford home care. So long-term care insurance is necessary.
Okay. And knowing the long-term care, I one of the things that I come across, and I'm assuming you've gotten, quite a bit more experience in this, is just the options. And when somebody that hasn't dealt with long-term care issues, I'm assuming there's a lot of options most people just don't even think about in that space.
Yeah, there are the, the options, Rick, and I hope I'm answering your question correctly. But the options are you you can be at home and receive care, or you need to go to a facility. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. And you mentioned like it might be an aide, it might be a nurse, it might be physical therapy. I guess there's a whole continuum of care out there that, as people progress into their long-term care need, for most people, they probably graduate along the continuum versus all or nothing.
And that, yes, and that is correct. So yeah, as they progress through their health, either improving or declining, they'll move through that process of maybe they're going to be at home for a little while, but they're going to need to go into an assisted living facility or the nursing home for more care. Um, so yeah, it's the care just depends on what's happening at the moment. And another thing, Rick, that you don't want to that we don't want to talk about is the caregiver. The caregiver, there's huge burnout with caregivers, and lots of times statistics show that the caregiver at home will end up in the nursing home or hospital before the one that's being cared for. And it's quite a burden on family members in caring for these loved ones.
I can imagine, and I appreciate your time today. I know that we're just scratching the surface here, but I appreciate you talking about your personal situation and what you've seen, so that we understand there's options out there, but the need is there. And we'll talk more in future calls about how to satisfy those needs with long-term care insurance and the options that are there. So thank you, Shane, for getting on, and I appreciate everybody else being here today. We'll talk again on a future call. Thank you.